I thought my wife was cheating on me, but I had a lot of trouble proving it to myself. Eventually, I would have to prove it to others too, so I used technology to solve my problem. While I'm a geek with a capital G and love all things computer-related, I also consider myself a pleasant and outgoing guy with a bit of Southern charm. I'm a Georgia boy, born, raised, studied, live, and work here. I have a circle of friends, and I'm somewhat athletic. I've been jogging and sometimes playing golf on the weekends since college, usually walking 18 holes with a club cart. I weigh only 10 pounds more than I did in high school and eat healthy. Cameron, who everyone calls Cam, was my wife. She is a beauty and the complete opposite of my geeky or nerdy personality. She is very outgoing and was a socialite in college where we met at a frat party. We got along, dated, got serious, got engaged right after graduation, and got married a year later. We were both 23 years old. Cam is hot. She is 5 feet 5 inches tall, blue-eyed, natural blonde, and well-built. She won several beauty pageants before entering high school, where she cheerleading and expanded her social life when her parents allowed her to start dating. She was even homecoming queen in high school. I didn't know her then, and how we ended up together remained a bit of a mystery to me. Cam received a business degree from the college where we met. I was a computer science student majoring in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence in my final year. I got a job with a company that uses all this technology, and Cam got a job helping evaluate insurance claims at a company near our rental property. We lived and worked near Atlanta. We were a carefree couple in our early 20s, ready for anything. We worked hard and played hard. Cam brought me out of my introverted shell. We went to a party or picnic almost every weekend and became close friends with Jake and Jen and Ross and Holly. To be fair, we were all attractive, athletic, and eager to get a good start in adulthood. I worked with Ross. Cam worked with Jake. Their spouses had other jobs in the area, one in real estate, the other in a trust bank. Each of us had ambitions to earn more money than we were earning, so we were dedicated to our work during the week. However, none of us were even close to rich. We lived close to each other, but not in the same areas, and our houses were all small rental houses. Ross called them starter homes. After 6 years of marriage, our sex rate had dropped to a couple times a week, and we were clearly taking each other for granted more than not. We made assumptions about each other, which more often than not turned out to be correct. Holly, Jen, and Cam started having bachelorette parties. Then Jake, Ross, and I started hosting poker nights at the same time, and we were joined by Aaron and Dean, both lawyers and neighbors whom the other guys introduced to our table. Our wives would gather in one of the houses and then go somewhere else while we laid out the cards and chips. I hadn't noticed for a long time, but something finally caught my attention after we'd gotten into the habit of spending Friday nights like this for over 6 months. Firstly, the evenings began to last longer and longer. We played cards and drank until the 3 women returned from the bachelorette party, and then we called it a day. At first it was around 9:30 in the evening, but over the months it became closer to midnight. There was always a good explanation: a great musical ensemble, a dance performance, a show at the place where they were, and so on. Secondly, during this time our loving communication subtly slowed down to once or twice a week, with twice becoming a rarity. I sensed Cam's lack of enthusiasm, but I didn't blame her. Moreover, we stopped making love on Friday after parties, despite my interest in it. Third, a few weeks before the 6-month mark of our Friday nights, Cam started staying late at work. Previously, she rarely worked later than 5 or 5:30, so this was a sudden departure from the norm and became a weekly event. On long evenings, she got home around 8 o'clock, nothing outrageous, but it helped her career, she said. She would come in, shower, change into casual clothes, and then have a late dinner, especially if I was cooking something. Fourth, I started reading erotic stories on the site, especially about unfaithful wives. These stories, in turn, made me suspicious as hell about what Cam did on her long work evenings and at her bachelorette parties. My first attempt at figuring out if I should worry about something was a simple solution. I made sure the Find My Friends app on her phone was working and that I could see where she was. I found it odd that she came home for lunch in the middle of the week for more than 2 hours. She stayed late that evening, and I didn't say anything when she got home. She didn't mention anything, only that at work they had an endless supply of claims to process. I felt that something was very wrong. My second foray into spying on my wife was to set up 2 simple cameras around the house while Cam was shopping on a Saturday morning. I installed one outside to wrap around the front door that we always use, and another in the bedroom overlooking our bed. I always wanted to have a camera by the door, and if Cam was cheating in some way, I thought she was using our bed. I learned a little. Cam did return home mid-afternoon the following Thursday, was alone, and did not go into the bedroom. I wondered if she had discovered one or both cameras. Things got more interesting on Friday night. According to the Find Friends app, the bachelorette party consisted of dinner at a popular restaurant, and then a visit to the Memories Lounge about 5 miles north of our house, just off one of the main highways. I didn't know much about Memories. Cam never mentioned going to the club, and I had a sneaking suspicion that she was dancing and drinking, not only with her friends, but also with someone else. On Saturday afternoon, while running errands, I stopped by Memories to check out the place. My impression was that it was a popular place on Friday nights when the club hit full swing. This got me thinking. Over a beer, I asked the bartender about webcams, and to my surprise, it turned out that they had 4 online cameras, 3 covering the crowd and tables from different angles, and the other monitoring the dance floor and the band. The 4 cameras were streamed online to promote Memories as a trendy place to visit. A few seconds later, I was watching myself on my iPhone as I finished my beer and headed home. I knew what I would be looking at the next bachelorette party. Wednesday was a mystery. Cam came home for a long lunch. Holly and Jen were with her. I think they ate and then were out of the cell for over an hour. I wondered where they were in the house, or even if they were in the backyard. The next day, after receiving a notification on my phone that she had left work, I began tracking her and also checking the home cameras. I saw Cam drive up to the house and park, and then she and an unknown man entered the house. They didn't show up for 2 hours and didn't go into the master bedroom. Crap. I realized that I had a serious problem, but I had no real evidence of cheating. I wondered who this guy was. I took a dozen screenshots of him when he entered the house, but I didn't recognize him. I had no doubt that my wife was cheating. I just had to figure out how to deal with it. I wanted to get more information before taking serious action. Over the weekend, I added 2 more cameras, one in the living room and one in the guest room. On Friday night, as usual, 3 girls went to a party, and we started a game of poker as a group of 5. I was very kidnapped and lost some money. Ultimately, Cam, and I assume Jen and Holly, went to Memories, according to the Find Friends app. I gave them 30 minutes to settle into the club and then walked a few hands away. I booted up my laptop in the kitchen and went to the Memories website. There was a live band playing in the club and a lot of people were dancing, including 3 women. As the dance floor camera panned around the area, I caught a good shot of Cam and her dance partner, the same guy we had at our house. Crap. I took more screenshots and got good shots. I recorded everything that happened in video format. The club's webcams were high definition. I took pictures of Holly and Jen with their partners too. Then I watched the plot unfold. I called the men guy number 1, 2, and 3. A minute later, on another camera, I saw Cam hand over her phone, which I was tracking, to Holly. Holly put her phone in her back pocket and went back to kissing the guy she was dancing with. Cam and the unknown guy number 1 disappeared behind the Memories door. I wondered where she was going and knew it wasn't good. I had no way to track her. I was left in limbo. I watched as Jen and Holly made out in the booth with their boyfriends. About an hour later, Cam and guy number 1 showed up again. Holly gave Cam her phone back, as well as her cell phone. Now I was really suspicious. Holly and guy number 2 disappeared for 45 minutes before returning. Then Jen and guy number 3 disappeared for an hour. They clearly didn't want their phones tracked. By this time, we had finished the game. Aaron and Dean left, and I shared my findings with Ross and Jake. I played them the live camera footage, including the handing over of the phones and the return of Jen and guy number 3. I then watched as all 3 of them slowly danced, kissed and hugged, and then left the club. In the 20 minutes before they showed up at the house, the 3 of us agreed not to say or do anything until we got more information. I guaranteed that I could get more data with more observation and reconnaissance in memories. We were all angry and tried to hide it. We blamed losing at poker for our bad mood. Cam hasn't come home for lunch this week alone or with anyone. I behaved honestly, as did Ross and Jake. One afternoon, I went to Memories and had a good look around, both inside and out. 100 yards north of the club, behind a small shopping center, still on the main road, stood a slightly run-down Class C motel. On a whim, I walked into their office. I asked the young receptionist if they minded guests without luggage. He laughed and said, "Damn, that's half our business. Guys go to Memories, pick up girls, and come here to have sex with them." I asked, "On Fridays?" "Especially." I pulled out my phone and a $50 bill. Showed him Cam's photo. "Did you see her?" He laughed, snatching the bill from my fingers. "Yeah, she's a regular on Friday nights. Usually with the same guy, but not always." I showed the screenshot of guy number 1 to Cam, and he nodded. "Yes." I showed photos of Holly and Jen and the other 2 guys and got positive responses. He added, "They rent a room and take turns occupying it, although a couple of times they were all together." "Are there cameras?" He shook his head. "If anyone even suspects that we have cameras, we will lose all business. No, that will never happen. The only camera here is watching the counter." He pointed to an obvious security camera above his head. On a whim, I asked, "Can I see the room they rented?" He shrugged. "They're all the same. Look." He gave me the key to room 101, which was right next to the office door. I went into the room and took a bunch of photos, and then took a video, a panorama around the room. I had an idea. A couple of minutes later, I returned the motel key, gave the guy another $50, and thanked him. I said, "Not a word to anyone." He made a gesture as if he was zipping his lips. Ross, Jake, and I canceled our poker game on Friday night, but got together as if we were going to play. Our wives soon left Jake's house, heading to dinner. Jake brought out a large portion of ribs and salad, so the 3 of us ate and then got down to business. I've already told them about my findings at the motel. The trio of women arrived at Memories around 8:30 as the club began to come to life. We used our hotspots and iPads to watch the cameras in the club and see what was going on. Almost immediately, our wives were with men. I called guy number 1, guy number 2, and guy number 3. I had to physically stop Ross from breaking in and killing everyone. I promised him it would cost thousands and some sweet revenge for him. He calmed down and said he trusted me, but we didn't have much time. I thought this was unique since we had 3 wives who seriously violated our trust and clearly broke their wedding vows. From our vantage point across the street from Memories in Ross's SUV, we watched through binoculars as Jen and guy number 1 left the club and headed toward the motel. I noted that it wasn't Cam. They immediately entered one of the rooms, indicating that one of the 6 traders had rented the room earlier that day. After they left, I pulled out my next little technological marvel, a black, wireless, battery-powered contact microphone the size of a cigarette pack. I crossed the highway and walked around it before taping the microphone to the window of the trader's room. He was already transmitting sounds through my headphones and recording them on the laptop in the car. Ross and Jake listened. I warned them about the explicit content of what they would hear, but they insisted on knowing the whole truth. The sounds were pretty incriminating, even if we didn't have any images. Cam had sex with guy number 2 and Holly was with guy number 3. They alternated between men, apparently. We recorded everything in clear audio. The selection worked too well. We were devastated, but found some solace in the fact that we were close friends and were working through the grief of the end of our marriages together. We recorded 3 hours of audio from 9 p.m. to midnight before I packed up the microphone, and we headed home before our wives got back. There was no doubt that we were all being cheated on by our wives, and that women were changing partners. Also, we were seriously disrespected for talking about our weak husbands to our lovers. I've never heard Cam put me down like that, even when she was mad at me. The next morning I called Aaron, one of our lawyer friends, and he was kind enough to see Jake and me at 1 p.m. on Saturday. We explained what was happening, and he expressed his sympathy. He explained that he is not the toughest divorce lawyer in the state, but he knows one who is a good friend of his and who owes him money. He called Carla Winslow-esque, and we were at her house within an hour. She was looking forward to the start of 3 separate but related divorce cases. Carla said, "One thing you need to do is get pictures of them having sex. It's vital for your economic future." Jake and I looked at her. I said, "No chance unless I'll fake it." "A video of her admitting to cheating will do. In this state, your spouse doesn't need to know you're recording her, but get it on video." I smiled. "I think I know how to get it for each of us." Jake looked at me questioningly, and I promised to explain later. On Sunday, I told Cam that I needed to work most of the day in the office. Jake and Ross joined me in my company's empty office, and we began some computer work. I did most of the work using state-of-the-art AI video production software on our powerful computers. We used it at work, and it was damn expensive, but it worked like a charm. For the first 2 hours, we entered data into the company computers. We taught them that day through many individual videos and photographs that we brought into our little workshop. We uploaded video and photos I took in an empty motel room, followed by several hours of video of the 6 of us at the beach a few months ago. We've added home videos showing our wives in various situations, including Ross's backyard pool. We've uploaded 2 hours of carefully curated video and dozens of screenshots of guy number 1, guy number 2, and guy number 3, as well as dozens of photos of each of the women. All we had to do after that was shuffle and decide what kind of results we wanted from the intelligent intelligence program. My company has perfected image generation algorithms for our day-to-day work. We ran several facial recognition tests, and the computer performed perfectly. We then started creating scripts for our videos and images and fed them into the encoding algorithms. For me, it was like catching a big fish in a small barrel. After 6 hours of work, we had realistic videos showing Cam, Jen, and Holly cheating on each of the 3 men in a motel room. Each video was about 5 minutes long. I thought they were almost flawless. They were good enough for what we were going to do with them. The computer also generated a dozen photographs of each woman in sexual and compromising situations with each of the men. I gave pen cameras to my friends, and we spent an hour learning how to use them. We tested on each other until we could use them as well as a regular camera. I downloaded each couple's respective videos onto separate flash drives, again making sure they knew how best to present the information to their wives and what they needed to do to record a confession of infidelity from their wife. We discussed how to use what we were creating all day. At this point, despite our general depressed state due to the breakdown of our marriages, we went home and to our future ex-wives. Cam made dinner when I got home. I was quiet while I ate, and she noticed it. I explained, "Just a tough job at work. Give me a drink and another hour or 2 to get through this, and I'll be fine." After dinner, I turned on the pen camera, making sure it was recording to the large memory card inside the device, and joined Cam in the living room. She was watching TV. I took the remote control and suddenly turned off the TV. I said bluntly, "We need to talk." Cam suddenly looked worried and probably underestimated what the next hour would be like. I took my computer and placed it in front of her. I downloaded photos and videos onto my laptop. "I have several photographs and videos that seem to show what you have been up to. I would like to know if they are an accurate depiction of your betrayal of me and our marriage." Cam gasped at my statement and began to stutter. I played the video that the home camera recorded of her entering the house with guy number 1, But then the scene cut to footage of them on the bed in the guest room. She gasped, "Oh no, 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 it's not what you think. I can explain." I didn't give her the chance as the video continued on the screen. I raised my hand to silence her, and she complied. Tears flowed down her cheeks. She was caught. The film shows several photos of her with guy number 1 and separately with guy number 2 in a motel room. I saw faint signs of error here and there in the eyes' images, but Cam didn't notice the change in perspective. I said with great sarcasm, "This video really shows that you enjoyed sex outside of our marriage." I stopped playback. "Would you like to explain how accurately this video depicts your behavior?" I said sarcastically. I deliberately sat so that the camera handle would record her reaction. Cam began to give what may have been a superficial scripted speech, but her words were the tropes and platitudes of a cheating spouse. "I'm so sorry you found out. However you found out, it was just sex. What I did doesn't matter to our relationship. I'm sorry I cheated. I can stop at any time and I will. I love you and want to be with you forever, and please don't divorce me. I know it looks bad, but it was just fun." I raised my hand and said, "Let's hear what you said about me to one of your lovers." I played an audio tape of her demeaning me, telling me what a worthless man I was, how our sex life was terrible and nothing like what he could give her, and how she hoped they would always have sex. Cam looked shocked to hear her own words. I asked directly, "How did your betrayal begin?" I put a photo on my laptop of her and Guy No. One at the motel. I didn't mention the fake photo, but she could have seen it. The angle of the photo should have alerted her to the fact that it couldn't be real unless the photographer was in the room, but she didn't seem to notice that flaw. Cam began a long story about how she, Holly, and Jen had met and danced with these 3 guys many months ago, maybe 6 months ago, and liked them. And then the sex began almost immediately. I noticed that she tried to shift some of the blame onto her friends. I interjected, "So you've been sleeping with these 3 men for over 6 months?" "Yes," she explained in detail, and hoped that I would forgive her for going beyond the boundaries of our marriage to get pleasure and new experiences. She said that she only humiliated me to please the guys she was with. "Have you had sex with your friends? I saw the 3 of you come here one day during lunch break." Cam nodded. "Yeah, we tried with each other, but it wasn't that fun." "Why did you stop using our house?" "I started to worry that the neighbors might see us and say something to you. We used Jen's house and Holly's house a couple of times, but only if they could get off work." "Did you let these men do things to you that you didn't let me do?" "Yes." If I was looking for repentance, there was none. In her words, I felt that she was rather bragging. "Why did you and Holly and Jen switch partners?" I asked in a friendly tone. I tried to get her to talk and continue to brag about her actions. Cam relaxed a little when she realized I wasn't that angry. It was fun and varied. Still in a friendly tone, I said, "Did you understand that I would divorce you as soon as I found out about your infidelity?" Cam started crying again. "Please don't say that. I love you. I want to grow old with you. I don't want a divorce. Can't we live like we used to?" I had a feeling that, same as before, would include her cheating with other men. I shook my head. "That's not going to happen, and it's already too late. Once you did something that wouldn't pass the husband's fidelity test, you risked divorce. Bringing guys home for sex wasn't smart either. You thought the neighbors, or won't I notice? You've had sex with every guy here, right?" Cam nodded through her tears. "Yes, we used the guest room. I didn't let them use our bed, even though they wanted to." I said firmly, "And today the guest room is yours again. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. Move your things there until you move out. I will file for divorce in the next few days. Hire a lawyer." Cam was silent for a few seconds and then tried to force the situation. She spat out some poison. Some of her words sounded like a ready-made plan B. "If you divorce me, I will take every last cent you have and make you pay alimony for decades. I will find one of the men to beat you severely." I laughed. "I've already talked to a lawyer. With the evidence of infidelity that she has, at least in this state, you automatically lose your right to alimony. Besides, we both have enough money to live independently. I have enough evidence like you know now. Your cheating house is rented, and we don't have enough savings to buy our own. I'll split it with you, as you'll see in the divorce papers. We only had a few $1,000s in our bank account, and I used it to pay credit card bills, which were mostly yours expenses. You need to get your own credit cards. Joint ones no longer work. By the way, who paid for the motel? Still angry, she said. One of the guys, but we chipped in. It wasn't that nice of a hotel, but at least the sheets were clean. She stopped and added, I don't want a divorce. Can't we get over this? On this confession, I remained silent, went upstairs, and went to bed. I locked the bedroom door. Then he turned off the camera grip. Cam wanted to use the bathroom, and I told her she was out of luck. She had to use the toilet near the kitchen. The next morning, as agreed, Jake, Ross, and I compared notes. Each of us managed to extract recognition from our wives. Holly and Jen also called out Cam and gave more details about their many infidelities, including how they were all involved by name. We learned that the men's names were John, Glenn, and Terry. We tested the mini SD cards from each camera handle, and the confessions were good, high-quality recordings from each of our wives. As we had rehearsed, neither of us moved much, so the camera did not shake and remained mostly focused on the respective wife. Recording audio or video of your spouse was legal in the state. No notice was required. Our lawyer handled all 3 cases in parallel. Our wives were served with divorce papers on Tuesday, with adultery listed on the papers. Moreover, given the recorded threat to me, I received restraining orders from approaching Cam and the 3 men whom Jen named by name in her confession. They were all given papers by the sheriff to emphasize the seriousness of the case. Cam moved out of the house that same day due to the decree. Our divorces progressed in parallel, and 76 days after serving the papers on the women, we became divorced men. Attempts at reconciliation and counseling met resistance on our part. The confession of adultery was sufficient to prevent the judge from insisting on such futile actions. Our wives did not continue the fight. The judge asked how we got almost identical confessions from each of our wives. I have briefly explained about realistic videos to trigger discussion from our ex-wives, and how each of us was very careful to never claim that these were real recordings, photographs, or data. The judge was familiar with artificial intelligence, nodded, and said that this probably would not be the last time he would hear about the use of AI in his office. Jake, Ross, and I went out for drinks after the decrees were formalized. We agreed to keep in touch and leave all this crap behind us to move on with our lives. As it turned out, everything worked out pretty well for us. Our ex-wives, not so much. I invited Cam to stay in the house we rented because I wanted to improve my living conditions. However, she had to pay the rent in full. She couldn't cope with her earnings, so she moved out. Jen and Holly found themselves in the same situation with their living arrangements. 3 of them rented an apartment together. Cam, Jen, and Holly were unhappy about their divorce. They begged for forgiveness and reconciliation, but Jake, Ross, and I were not in the mood for that. I think each of us could forgive a couple of wild nights, but the long nature of their offense, plus what we heard from each of the wives as they humiliated their husbands, ultimately decided the outcome of the matter. I stayed in the house and even negotiated a reduction in rent since the owner was sympathetic to me because of what happened with my cheating wife. I did some renovations and bought new furniture since Cam took some with her. I insisted that she take the entire set of furniture from the guest room, since that was where her infidelity took place. The irony of her prize was not lost on her. Ross learned from Holly that 3 wives left the men they cheated with. Their ploy was a pathetic attempt at reunification. Holly somehow found out that these men had moved on to other partners. Cam, Holly, and Jen's reputations as sitting ducks quickly spread throughout the party community of the city. The ex-husbands swear that they had nothing to do with this. They were often attempted for sex. Some men even offered money for services. I don't think any of them accepted such offers, but we lost contact with them, and by then we didn't care. Cam's father, upon learning of the divorce, called me personally and asked for forgiveness for not instilling the right moral principles in his daughter. I told him that I was still grieving the loss of my life with Cameron, but felt some enthusiasm and optimism about a future with someone who could remain faithful. I assured him that I had new criteria for any woman with whom I began a serious relationship. Being a good guy, an engineer in a well-paying job at a good company, and suddenly free, I felt like someone had fired the starting pistol, and every single woman within a 50-mile radius wanted to see if we could get along. Of course, not our ex-wives. My sex life was back to an acceptable level within just a few weeks, and the women we chose to date were nice, girl-next-door types. Carla and Ellie, the wives of Aaron and Dean, our poker friends, learned about divorces and their causes, and soon began actively looking for suitable girlfriends for us. They each had single female friends that they quickly suggested to Ross, Jake, and me. We weren't proud. We loved female company, so we accepted most of the offers for dates. My friends had similar experiences, and we all had active sex lives like me. We went on a few double and triple dates just for fun, but it was still too fresh at that point, so neither of us trusted women enough to commit to serious relationships. Out of curiosity, on a Friday night without a date, I checked out the webcams at the Memories Lounge. The evening was interesting. Our ex-wives didn't show up at the club, but the 3 men they cheated with were there and hid behind 3 other women. I recognized one of them, Wendy Jarvis. She was with 2 of her friends and was being actively courted by a trio of men. I stored this information in my memory. After thinking about it overnight, I decided I had to do something. Wendy was in my class at school, so she was my age. We lost contact, like many other classmates, but apparently she was nearby. So close that I visited the Memories Lounge for entertainment. I found Wendy's on Facebook. She was married to Scott Mitchell, another high school classmate of mine. There were many happy photos of the 2 of them on her Facebook pages. I thought about how I would feel if someone told me about my ex-wife's impending infidelity, and I decided that I should talk to him. Perhaps he was aware of what was happening, but perhaps not. He should have decided for himself how to deal with this situation. I took a couple of photos of Scott Mitchell from Wendy's Facebook pages and loaded them into my facial recognition software. I received other photos and information that allowed me to use the Office AI system to obtain his contact details, including his mobile phone number. I called Scott. He remembered me, and I suggested meeting for a cup of coffee late in the morning. I suggested that he not tell Wendy anything about our meeting for now. He was immediately wary, but I assured him that everything would become clear over a cup of coffee. Scott and I met again at Starbucks for the first time in almost 10 years. He hasn't changed much, and I don't think I have either. His first question was, "Okay, what's going on? You've made me very wary about this. I hope you're not selling anything, because I won't buy anything." We sat down and I started. Almost a year ago, I was married for 6 years to a girl named Cameron, whom I met in college. She started going to bachelorette parties with her 2 friends. As it turned out, they met 3 guys and began cheating with them. I found out about this, I received a confession from her, and now we are divorced. Her 2 friends also divorced. Last night, I saw on the internet that your wife Wendy and 2 of her friends were at the Memories Lounge, where our ex-wives used to hang out on Friday nights. This place has webcams online. The women, including Wendy, were with the same 3 guys who stole our ex-wives from their marriages. I thought you might like to know, maybe you wouldn't, so I thought I'd call you. Scott suddenly looked stunned. He stared at me. I called up the video clip I had recorded from the Memories webcams last night on my phone and showed him his wife kissing John from my recent past. I found out a few months ago that his full name was John Ray. Next to Wendy and John were 2 other women and 2 other men that Cam cheated with, Glenn Wright and Terrence Johnson. They also kissed. I gave more details. I don't know if Wendy had sex with any of them, but the likelihood is there and is growing every second, if she hasn't already. I didn't look long when I saw her. When they convinced our wives to do everything, the men rented a motel room a few steps north of the Memories Lounge and went there with their female companions for the night. The three men also swapped women. I don't know if Wendy went to this motel. Like I said, I was in your shoes a few months ago, and when I saw Wendy, I decided that I wanted to find out the bad news early enough to try to save my marriage. I've always liked you, and I'm really sorry that brought such news. What you do with it is up to you. Do you have my contact information for my call? If you need a good divorce lawyer, let me know. Scott muttered thanks for revealing the information, then sat stunned looking into my cup of coffee. He looked at me and said, "What would you do? What would you do?" I told my whole story, how Cam tracked the cameras, my discoveries at the motel, and then the creation of videos and photos with artificial intelligence and use of them to extract a confession of infidelity from Cam. Talked about Ross and Jake too, and then about the quick divorces our lawyer got through the court and how our husbands came out of it with relatively small losses. Scott nodded in understanding. Scott said, "Wendy, Mary, and Heather only started going out on Fridays 2 weeks ago. They were just going to relax. They didn't get home too late, so maybe nothing had happened yet. Serious. But by the end of the day, I will know for sure. Today, she confesses everything, or our marriage is over." Scott asked me to share with him a 4-minute video clip from the Memories Lounge webcams, and I did it. For the three women, this video was quite compromising, unless they were alone and looking for adventure. He stood up, shook my hand, and headed to his car. He didn't touch his coffee. I stayed and finished mine and his. I had a date to get ready for, and I needed a haircut. I got home from my Saturday date around noon on Sunday. I was quite pleased. Scott called me an hour later. He wanted to treat me to a cup of coffee and share the news. I agreed, and we met at 2 o'clock. Scott looked serious, but calmer than before. We bought coffee and sat outside where no one could overhear us. Scott began. "Before I spoke to Wendy, I contacted Will and Todd, Mary and Heather's husbands. I showed them the video, and we decided to have a group confrontation. This happened around 5 p.m. last night under the pretext of cocktails with friends. I prepared the video so I'll show it on TV. When we all sat down in my living room with drinks, I turned on the TV and let the video play for 2 minutes. Our wives were dumbfounded. I said to the three women, 'Would you like to tell us what happened last night? We know better, and any false explanations will be met with less kindness.' All three of our wives were crying by then. Wendy was pleading that she had done nothing other than what we saw in the video. She limited her answers to herself, and this was echoed by Will and Todd. They demanded a full explanation from their wife. Mary defended herself by saying that she had only kissed a guy named Glenn. Heather cried and admitted, 'I went to the motel with Terry. I'm so sorry. I got carried away. What can I do to fix this between us? I'm afraid their marriage is on the rocks.' Todd is furious. He kicked her out of the house. She had to go back to her parents and tell them what happened, according to Wendy, who spoke to her in the morning. Tears. Wendy is very remorseful and offers me everything she can on a silver platter. Mary is like that with Will too. They promised never to have a bachelorette party again. That was already one of my demands of her before she made that promise. My other demands are that she tell her parents what she did and go to counseling with me. She is with her parents now. I know this will be a painful experience, and she deserves it. I asked her to play the video of her actions to them as part of my demand. In fact, it was more of a requirement than a request. She understands that our marriage is hanging by a thread." I said, "So maybe you caught it early enough to survive the blow." "I think so. We will know more after the first few sessions of consultation. I need to understand what is underlying her flirting and potential betrayal. If she hides from herself that she has stopped loving me, then our marriage will end regardless of her behavior. I love her, but our marriage cannot be one-sided. Besides, my trust in her is completely shattered. I'm not sure I can rebuild it. We were going to have kids, but I put it on hold. Wendy is heartbroken, but understands what's required to seriously redefine our marriage. I shook my head. At least you have some wiggle room. Rebuilding trust in someone will take a long time, perhaps never the full trust that was there, but enough to move on with your life. Scott shook his head. Every time she's out of my sight, I'll imagine her flirting with some guy and maybe even having sex with him. I nodded. I understand. Even though Cam and I are divorced, every time I think about her, I imagine her in bed with some guy. The frequency of such thoughts is decreasing, but they still occur. You may never be able to get rid of them. I'm not an expert on this. We talked a little more and decided to keep in touch. I felt like I had a new friend, and Scott agreed. He mentioned that he told Wendy how he found out about her infidelity, and she was actually grateful that I caught her and stopped her from cheating more seriously than a few kisses and hugs. Scott and I kept in touch. His marriage survived, but barely. So does Will and Mary's marriage. Todd divorced Heather. He couldn't overcome her infidelity. It took 2 years after my divorce before I found someone with whom I was in a serious relationship. I went through a dozen counseling sessions about trusting women and my look at relationships. Ellie, Dean's wife, was the source of the connection that blossomed for me. Jane was amazing, with pretty strong morals, demanding loyalty and communication above everything else we shared. 9 months after our first date, I proposed to her, and she accepted. 6 months later, we got married. We had already agreed to have children soon after the ceremony. Life was good. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even click to the next one.